I've had some conversations with people about Web3, and explaining that is kind of this huge ordeal, right? Because we're really, it's breaking a lot of people's brains just trying to understand what Web3 is. So how would you explain it? Like, talk to us about Web3. What is it? How is it going to change things? Like, just give us the lowdown on Web3.
I can give you my succinct answer. Whether, so the way I would describe it is an opportunity to redefine how the internet economy works, provide more ownership to the users of it, and reward communities for participation. And then the decentralized part is really, securing a future where individual corporations can't control access to all of the above, right? So for me, at least, I think what's changed over the years, and maybe it's almost coming back on itself, right? Like in the early days of Web 1, if you want to call it that, there was quite a lot of freedom. The internet was quite an expressive place. There wasn't the conformity that happens now, and there wasn't really a lot of companies operating on it. It was very much a kind of, Wild West, let's say. Lots of, multicolored scrolling text across websites and mainly filled with personal websites rather than corporate websites. And then obviously I think, Web 2 sort of came, and, the way I look at that, notwithstanding the technical constraints, but was a more business-led approach to the internet, really realistically owned by the likes of Google and Facebook and others now, I would say. And internet providers have, quite a substantial amount of control potentially at their disposal. And then, with Web3, there's this technological advancement, which is really allowing that perhaps initial version of the internet to come back alive again, where it becomes, more in control for the communities themselves. And I think we've seen quite a lot of evidence recently around this reward for community participation piece, with the likes of the airdrops that have been going on around the SOS and Lux and ENS and all these other things. That is, in my view, people have never had a situation where by owning a domain name on Web 2, you get free money. Like, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I've never experienced that on Web 2.
No, me neither, right? So so it's a really odd one in the sense that I still have some concerns about, how that cycle really benefits, long term. But it certainly calls to the way that Web3 thinks and operates, right? It is more about community reward, spreading perhaps more of the economy around. And when you kind of put the finance side of how the internet works much closer to to things, it all becomes a bit more integrated. Like having a wallet that's a browser extension, very easily accessible, and in a few clicks you're able to buy the NFT that you want. But that's very different than what we've been used to in Web 2. And it's taken a hell of a lot of time to get it as good as it is today. Like nowadays, if you're using a website that has Stripe, it's a pretty painless exercise to buy something online. But it wasn't always like that, right? It was really bad in those early days. It's taken a lot of effort. And I do think that, it for me, like I've seen this kind of cycle before, and it is interesting to think about it longer term, but for me, it is ultimately more control, a more community-oriented economy around the internet, and less control or censorship, I guess, in some senses that corporations might have on the internet today. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Lux, the airdrop Lux, which is, for those who don't know, it's the token behind the marketplace Lux Rare that's recently launched. I think that's I've been openly bullish about Lux Rare over the last 24, 48 hours, and a lot of people have asked me why I'm so excited, and I think it epitomizes Web3, really. It's certainly where we are currently anyway with Web3, and it's a decentralized platform where the participants are reaping the financial benefits of the platform. It's kind of like what everyone assumed OpenSea would one day do, which makes me super excited. You know, for those who don't know, a bunch of people were dropped, airdropped a token, the Lux token, and it was based on your activity in the ecosystem, right? So people who had been trading more on OpenSea received more of this token. And the immediate thought for a lot of people was to, okay, I'm going to sell this token, and for, you know, it's $5,000, it's $1,000, and it's free money. There's that saying. But I think a lot of people missed the mark on what the token really was, and that's why even today you're seeing the price increase. And I think you're seeing a lot of really influential individuals in the crypto space started to talk about the project and why they're holding the token. And for those who don't know how it works, it's essentially an OpenSea where the holders of the token are going to be paid the fees from the platform, right? And when you think about that for a moment, it's really confusing. But it incentivizes the original team to really develop and build something remarkable, because their medium of payment, i.e. the token, is completely worthless if the platform doesn't succeed. So their payment is through making sure that everybody else, the community as a whole, is reaping the rewards of the success of the platform. So they get paid if the community gets paid, and if everyone involved is being paid. So they're sharing the success of the platform. They're almost giving out this dividend of success. It's not that they're thinking of a more manipulative business way to make some money and scalp from crypto investors. They're really just pushing this Web3 business model almost to its max that we're kind of seeing right now, i.e. we're only getting paid if everyone gets paid. And, you know, I think that's a great example of sort of Web3 in action. I think it was Chris Dixon that said, I think the quote was, we've took a wrong turn with Web2, right? These walled gardens with ad models everywhere and you don't own anything. And whether you like some of the individuals that have been sort of blacklisted from social media or not, it's still remarkable that you can essentially be shut off from Web2, right? If you think about it, if Google were to suspend your account along with every other social, such as Twitter and Facebook, you'd be in a pretty dark Web2 space, right? I'm not quite sure what corner of the internet you'd be able to use in a functional manner, right. Which is crazy. Right or wrong, it's insane. It's my data. I gave you all this data. You've monetized that data and you've made a fortune. And now you're saying you're taking that away. And Web3 really solves that, where you, the individual, own your data. And an interesting example of a Web2 company masquerading as Web3 could be OpenSea, right? They really use that Web3 decentralized layer for their functionality, but they're applying Web2 thinking. You know, if an NFT is stolen, they will blacklist that NFT so it can't be traded on their marketplace, which is a very Web2 thing to do. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just very Web2, you know, saying, okay, I'm taking crypto holder A's word for it that you've stolen his NFT, and as such, you can't trade it on this marketplace. Whereas I think the future is more decentralized and trustless, right? I think we'll start to see a bunch of trustless protocols springing up, entire startups. Like Facebook, for example. I think the world would be a much better place if Facebook was founded in Web3. It will probably be too difficult to go back on some of these things, like the big social networks. I'm not sure how we reverse that damage, or even produce a Web3 social network that scales. But yeah, I think there was an interesting startup, and maybe Zeon can recall the name of it. I remember when Twitter shut down their API back in sort of 2012, 2013, and there was that Twitter sort of esque cloney startup.
I'm trying to remember. It was like I don't remember the name of it.
Sort of Phosphorus, maybe. It was a paid Twitter almost, and there was a bit of a. Yeah. I guess it was way ahead of its time. I can't remember the name of it now, and it's gonna bite me all day.
I rember signing up to it.
Yeah,
but I'm like Googling now, seeing if I can figure out.
Remember the name, but it was almost ahead of its time. I think that was kind of like a Web3 project without the Web3 infrastructure in place, right? Where they were saying, okay, the owners you should own this data. That this social network is built for you, but the data on it is owned by you, the individual. And you know, we're not going to sell that data. And almost everyone, even, you know, my grandma will understand the idea of selling my data is bad. So almost everyone universally agrees with that. Yeah, everyone just accepts it as a way of life now, and it never used to be this way, and I don't think particularly it will always be this way. But we're still in that kind of dark age where, okay, you sell my data, and it's, when we hear about these sort of government leaks where they're snooping on individuals, most of the press will just say something along the lines of, we have nothing to hide, then why be worried? I don't think it's a case of I have nothing to hide. It's just a case of, this is mine. It's my data. Like, I want to keep it private. I own this. So I think if I was to summarize Web3 in one statement, it's really the consumer or the web user taking ownership of their data and their assets in a way that means they truly own them.
Yeah. What do you think Web3 is going to look like practically? So for the regular internet user right now, I am on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and I'll go buy a rug on Amazon. Like, what's that going to look like in Web3? And we can go into like dream mode if you want to, and it's like, well, it could be this, What do you think that's going to look like for your average user once Web3 is a more popular thing that everybody's using?
I'll branch on one specific area where I have some knowledge. I think commerce is a good one, and maybe Zeon will jump in on this after me as well. The next, I believe the next big sort of Web3 breakthrough will probably be in commerce. Here's a good story. There's a lot of people who wanted to buy into Megapont in the UK, and they were trying to acquire Stacks, which is the currency of the blockchain that we launched on, and their bank, for example, wouldn't let them send a payment to Binance, right? So it's blocked. I can't buy Stacks, and there just really was no way to purchase that, and then vice versa. You have a large sum of crypto, and you cash it out to your bank account, and then you find that your funds are kind of frozen, and you have to justify where they've come from to spend them. Mm-hmm. Whereas in crypto world, I could just spend them wherever I want. No one cares. I could send Phosphorus 10 ETH. No one cares. He's going to get 10 ETH. Whereas if I want to sort of spend $30,000 on something, maybe a car, quite often you'll have to provide source of funds. Your bank will ask where these have come from, and you start to really understand that even that sort of that foundational layer of finance, that you don't really own your own money. And there's that joke, as soon as you put money in the bank, it's the bank's money. It kind of is true for the most part. But you really don't have full control and authority over something as basic as your earned wealth and earned money. And I think commerce and crypto will probably be a big play in 2022 and in Web3, where you'll start to see merchants just avail the Web3 checkout, right? I think it's a matter of time now before you see really popular merchants accept MetaMask as a payment source, which isn't really MetaMask, right? It's your wallet with a nice skin on top of. Right. And I think that will be when we start to see a bit more adoption, i.e. the checkout experience for using a Web3 wallet like MetaMask is arguably better than you find on Amazon these days. And that's insane to think about, right? Amazon have one of the most optimized checkout flows in the world. They spend billions making sure that everyone is spending the most they should be there. But a Web3 wallet, I go to a website, I find something I want to buy, and I click a couple of buttons, sign a transaction, and there's the transaction complete. So I think commerce will be the stepping stone for a lot of individuals. And like thinking dream world, I would love to see Web3 social networks be a thing. I think I'm sort of, I guess I use Twitter so much, so it's odd for me to say I'd quite like Twitter to not exist, but I would miss it more than the next guy. So I would like to see a real solid attempt at a Web3 social network where the users own their data. I think it could be quite interesting. I have no idea what that looks like, and I think it's a difficult problem to solve, but somebody will solve it one day.
Yeah, the issue of somebody of in Web2, companies made money off of our data. They advertised to us, and they made a crap ton of money that way. Just they knew more about me than I know about me from observing my online
That's
behaviors.
Scary, right?
Right, and now I saw this on Twitter, but it was like in Web 1, it's insert username and password. In Web 2, it's connect to Google and Facebook. And in Web 3, will be connect to wallet. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that is pretty much spot on. I think authentication as a mechanism that used in Web3 is again a nice use case.
And I think that, like, the way I think about it is, in order for it to win, it has to be invisible. And I think that's one of the things it's rather than thinking about sectors being disrupted or individual items, that I think in reality it's going to be a whole bunch of things that people start to use without realizing that it's Web3 backed. I think that's where you get mainstream adoption. Like, no one really cares that, for example, Facebook is built on cloud computing. Cloud computing is a pretty great advancement when it comes to Web 2, but no one really cares, right? Like, fundamentally, it's more about what value you get from using Facebook or Twitter or whatever, rather than the infrastructure behind it. And I suspect that we're so early that we think it matters that it's on the blockchain and so on and so forth, but that's not really gonna be appealing to the wider audience. So the reality is most people are going to need it to look like and feel like what they're used to. What goes on under the hood is not really their concern. So I think obviously at the moment, the biggest challenge for anybody is the onboarding experience of Web3 is pretty bad for a normal internet user. The people that are in it today are more than likely, their appetite for, beta software is perhaps higher. We're maybe a bit more risk takers in general. But you're not going to get your mom or your grandma installing MetaMask in their browser, right? That's just not going to happen. So it's going to.
I'm going to try. I will try.
Yeah, well,
you got to try.
Yeah, you got to try.
Yeah, but like think about just getting I remember having challenges like convincing people to use their credit card online.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like you gotta like, I would always remind people to think back of all the challenges that have happened. Like, imagine even just getting people to use mobile phones after landlines, digital radio versus terrestrial radio. Don't forget that there's always going to be these kind of, I guess it's like the crossing the chasm kind of stuff. If you read any of that, there's these segments of the market that are like, we're in this early adopters phase, and I still think that has a while to go. But in order to break out of that, we're going to have to make things more seamless, and people are going to be using Web3 without realizing it. That's when I think the true value is going to come out. I definitely think it will redefine how e-commerce works, how shops will work, how payments will work, all of those things. I've been listening to a few different podcasts and getting intrigued and excited about self-repaying mortgages and all these kind of things. Like, these are things that you're just like, oh, yeah, I can't imagine that. Like, you have to like go, huh, like, and it's intriguing, but everything needs to go mainstream. And I think we've seen this with other technology that and things need to look the same. If you think about where the iPhone is today versus where it was when it launched, like, it looked more like a regular phone back then. They had to have certain design choices that were made really for to keep it as mainstream as possible. Now they can be outrageous. Now they can have you answering phone calls on your bloody watch, but they wouldn't have got away with that back when they launched, right?
Right.
And so that's the way I think about Web3.